Before we begin, thank you very much to Combiner, I Hardly Know Her, for joining the Patreon campaign. Yes, you requested. I will say just about anything as long as I think it's okay. Thank you very much for the contribution. Thank you very much for a silly shout out. Those are always fun to start off the video with. Hey guys, who remembers TJTV? Do you remember like when I was doing cartoons and kids show reviews? I was super snarky and all that. Okay, I finished a script that's going to be very similar to that. It's going to be a little bit different, but I really like what I've come up with. It was going to be the Christmas episode, the video that I post for Christmas, but I might have it done before then. Because I'm actually really eager to actually work on it and actually make it happen. So, it's going to be kind of like a preview of how the new cartoon reviews will work if we hit $1,000 on Patreon. So, I wanted you to have a preview of how that was going to go. So, stay on the lookout. That's going to be a huge video coming out, hopefully before the end of the year. Alright. Today we are talking about G1 characters who have better versions now, or who have had interpretations that have improved upon the source material. Now let's be honest here. G1 is a cartoon written to sell toys. They do put a little bit more meat to it than a lot of shows like that, but in the end it's still there to sell toys. So it's not the most in-depth writing you will find. That said, there are a lot of characters that are held kind of sacred in the pantheon of Transformers. You know, for instance, I would say there still has not been an Optimus Prime that has quite eclipsed the original, at least for what the original was going for. You know, there are interpretations where you could say, well, this Prime was better at that or this. Correct. Especially if you look into the comic books. Comic books get a lot more chance to give these characters depth and story. And for that reasoning, we're not going to include comic books in this list. I am only going to be talking about animated incarnations of these characters and when they were shown with improved versions of their original selves. So, like, for instance, Optimus Prime, I think at best you're going to find characters on par with the original. And we're going to get a low-hanging fruit out of the way with characters like Elita One, for instance. Now, Elita One in the G1 cartoon is written basically just be like a female Optimus Prime with, like, time-freezing powers. And that's about all she is. I wish she had more to her than that. Really do. But she does not. She's a one-episode character, doesn't get much depth. She's thrown in mostly just kind of as a gimmick episode. You know, and it's kind of because it's the 80s. The female characters were written in mostly to give screen time to Autobot boyfriends like Ironhide, Power Glide, and Inferno. And then, Optimus Prime himself. A lot of the red Autobots, now that I think of it. But if we look at Earthspark, Elita One finally gets her time to shine. I think everyone was taken aback when the Earthspark announced that it was going to be Elita One as the main female Autobot character rather than Arcee, which is kind of a welcome change of pace, to be honest. She is written as a much stronger character. She actually does have some depth to her, some wisdom to her that she imparts to the young Terrans. And she's just a really, really good fighter who is not simply female Optimus Prime. You know, she is a much more punch first and ask questions later type, which counterbalances Prime pretty well, being his second in command. Now, it's a great take on the character. It's a very refreshing take to actually get to see Elita One have some reverence to her. We did mention Arcee, and we will admit G1 Arcee does not have a lot of meat on the bones, and I don't just mean the female figure. What I mean is that she really didn't get to do much, because let's remember, Hasbro had no interest in her because they weren't going to sell a female toy to a bunch of boys. Sunbow wanted nothing to do with her. She was basically included because the writers of the movie insisted on it, and then Season 3 just had to work her into the cast. She's mostly existent in Season 3 as a sidekick role or a background. She doesn't get a whole lot to do. Her biggest roles are things like an Only Human, where they didn't have to write her as a female robot, and in Rebirth, where she had to save Daniel's life by becoming a headmaster with him. It's mostly all she really got to do, as opposed to Prime Arcee, who carries a lot of those almost like motherly traits to her in her relationship with Jack. though it might be closer to big sister in this case. But she also has a lot of things going on with herself. She has a lot of trauma that she works through with her partners who have died on her. Makes it very hard for her to connect to others and allow them to be close. And she is very much she tries to be a little bit more of a loner because of it. And yeah, she's actually a pretty strong character. Oh, and she actually gets a lot of screen time, unlike G1 Arcee. So again, we see the original traits in there, but they've given her so much more to work with that it makes her a far more interesting character to watch. Sticking with the theme, however, let's take a look at Ratchet. Now, G1 Ratchet's fine. He's the gruff medic of the team, and that's kind of what you expect from an ambulance transformer. I can respect that. Now, Ratchet's one of those G1 characters who was in the mix a lot, because let's face it, the G1 Autobots needed to be repaired a lot. However, he was never really in the mix as far as storylines go. You know, he's mostly there to help, like, oh, Optimus Prime is dying, so he's waiting in the wings to do the repairs once they bring the right parts back from Cybertron. So he can add some tension to a scene, but he never really carries a story himself in G1. And now, this was a toss-up. There was two Ratchets I could throw in here, and one of them was absolutely animated Ratchet. But I think, despite having a lot of background story stuff to him that does make him an interesting character, I find Prime Ratchet not only closer to G1 Ratchet in overall tone and character, but also just a far more interesting take. He also has that kind of gruff veteran, like, war doctor thing going on, but at the same time, he carries a lot of his own characteristics as well. There's a little bit of nuance to him. There's subtleties. You know, scenes in Prime, like where he's trying to help the kids with their science fair projects and screwing it up immensely for them. And just out of nowhere, like, something in this character really wanted to help out with those, which is fascinating. Like, it gives him some depth. It gives you some things to think about, like how this character's brain is ticking, which makes him a little bit more interesting to me. And I don't think I got that quite as much with animated Ratchet as I did Prime. So in this situation, yeah, I'd say Prime Ratchet pretty much nails the characterization started by the G1. Here's one with an unexpected source for you. Let's talk about Hot Rod for a bit. Hot Rod is always a divisive character, whether you blame him for the death of Optimus Prime or thought he was too whiny in Season 3. But regardless, he does have a unique place in Transformers. He has destiny thrust upon him. He is the chosen one amongst Transformers. And you can tell by the way that Optimus Prime absolutely aped the Matrix of Leadership from him and is now centrally known for having that particular bauble. I'm sorry, Hot Rod. You deserve better. You really do. However, if you do want a better story, if you are a Hot Rod fan and you do want a better story for him, well, you got to go to Cyberverse for that, and you wouldn't expect that, would you? Cyberverse is just kind of written off as one of those, you know, cheap kids cartoons for, you know, just to move some cheap Transformer toys. But genuinely, like, they actually told some very fun stories in that show. I'm, like, genuinely happy that I sat down and watched it. And considering episodes like 15 minutes long each, not even that with commercials, it's a quick sit. Like, even if you look at the full episode run, it goes by pretty quick. The pacing's pretty good. So, with Hot Rod, he also has leadership thrust upon him in Cyberverse under very different circumstances. In Cyberverse, the planet is invaded. Most everyone is being mind-controlled by Quintessons. Spoiler alerts for an old show. But, yeah. Point being, Hot Rod's one of the only Transformers left on the planet that has to pull everyone together, Autobot and Decepticon alike, to build some kind of ragtag team that can actually take on the Quintessons and rescue all the Autobots and Decepticons. You're looking at someone who genuinely saved the planet. He didn't need the Matrix of Leadership to do it, and he took to the leadership role way better than G1 Hot Rod did. You know, he was a really cool take. It was a really cool take on the character. You know, and He has relationships like Soundwave. I never expected Hot Rod and Soundwave to be such like a bromance power pair, but oh my god, it works. Oh my god, it worked. Soundwave was another one of those where I could have thrown like literally a dozen different versions on this list. Prime, Cyberverse, both have really fantastic depictions of Soundwave. Earthspark does too. I genuinely feel like all of those animated Soundwaves all kind of do their own thing, and they all do it equally well for what they're going for. We're trying for ones that are going for the same thing in different ways, where Cyberverse Hot Rod is obviously going through the story of G1 Hot Rod, but he's doing it with far less whining, far more maturity, and far more visual growth as a character. So that worked out a lot better for me than even the original. How about my boy? How about my boy Blitzwing? I love Blitzwing for something that happened completely accidental. His story getting cut in Season 3, meaning he got left in a very interesting place, willing to turn against Galvatron and the Decepticons for the sake of saving Cybertron, and willing to lay down his loyalties in order to stop the fighting. Like, he's accidentally fell into this really interesting role of wanting to be neutral. He's like kind of one of the first Transformers ever who just kind of went, I'm done, and walked away. But before that, yeah, he's just kind of a power-hungry Decepticon, teamed up with Astro Train to try and take over the Decepticons once upon a time, and he's mostly just kind of like a dumb frontline assault, other than that. So while I love Blitzwing, I have to admit, yeah, character-wise, thin. But then we have animated Blitzwing, who took that triple changing aspect and made it part of his personality. The 3 voices, the 3 faces was very entertaining. Like, this is a chaotic version of Blitzwing. And while he still has the same power to him as a triple changer, he's got a lot of his own unique traits as well that make him really, really fun to watch. Whether he's spouting off random non sequiturs or putting on a very bad Arnold Schwarzenegger impersonation, animated Blitzwing is a fantastic take on the character who is a lot of fun to watch. Granted, he doesn't have that whole turned against the Decepticon aspect to his story, but like we said, accidents happen. I'm still waiting for the story that actually works with that accident, but alas, has not happened yet. But we do have a nice Blitzwing that came after it. Here's another one you probably don't even know about if you don't follow literally every cartoon. We can talk Trypticon in this list. Yeah, like, you'd shock, right? Trypticon is the easiest one in this list to justify why the new version is better. Trypticon in G1, gigantic, dumb brute, followed the orders of whatever Decepticon tried to give them, whether it was Galvatron or Octane. He's not a very bright boy. He's just a big, dumb T-Rex. As a lot of the giant Decepticons tended to be, now that I think of it, combiners included. So, yeah, Trypticon, not the strongest G1 character. Again, we have to turn to the unexpected source of Cyberverse. Cyberverse Trypticon was such a trip when you first saw him on screen. For starters, it was a complete shock that he was even involved. But then to find out he, in that universe, is the leader of the mercenaries. And he actually does speak. And he speaks intelligently. He kind of has this mob boss mentality where, like, he treats the other mercenaries like family. You know, family he'd probably bite in half if they disobeyed him, but they're family. It's like a shattered glass Vin Diesel, right? But he was fun. I mean, talk about completely unexpected character shifts. Yeah, Trypticon was nuts in Cyberverse. Short-lived too. He appeared only in that little brief end bit they did for the show. Really could have used more of him though. And it's just such a weird idea, Let's throw in a city former. Let's throw in the big T-Rex as a leader. As a mob boss, it was fun. It worked. Of course, on this list, it's low-hanging fruit, because how do you get worse than the original, really? All right, let's make some controversy here. Let's make some controversy here. Let's ruin something, because part of this list, part of the intention of this list, is to actually just kind of like go with those few people left over that think that G1 is somehow sacred, and that, you know, it wasn't just a 22-minute toy commercial. They actually is actually the finest storytelling Transformers ever had. I've noticed they are not really in the fandom as much as they used to be, and that's probably for the best, because it is not a good take. Case in point, let's talk about G1 Megatron. I know, legendary villain of the 80s, and I know so many people who think like this is the perfect iteration of Megatron. He should never be a good guy. Whereas all this new stuff trying to make him into a good guy? The original was perfect. There's nothing wrong with the original. The original is a complete total failure. Okay, let's run this back here. So G1 Megatron does make for a great villain, albeit a cheesy villain of the 80s, as many 80s villains were. While on Cybertron, he had full control of the planet. When the war with the Autobots went to Earth, all of a sudden, not a single plan of his actually worked out. Even plans where he very easily could have been done with the Autobots. Hubris gets in the way, ego gets in the way, overconfidence, call it what you will. He just keeps screwing up. Over and over, he just keeps screwing up. So, what do you do? How do you expect me to take the character seriously when he gets so many things wrong? You know, how am I supposed to... Okay, when the 35th plot in a row fails to defeat the Autobots or conquer the Earth, how am I supposed to take you seriously as a villain anymore? You know, it starts to get down to that point. And then we move on to other Megatrons, and let's be honest, there's a lot of Megatrons I could have put on here. Prime, animated. I went for the lowest hanging fruit and the most obvious and picked the Beast Wars Megatron. We know how brilliant this version of the character was. We know how grand his master plan was and how carefully thought out it was. He is 5 steps ahead of everybody else at any given time. You know, and if he is defeated, it is usually because a factor he could not have anticipated occurred. How was I supposed to know there'd be a working Autobot shuttle somewhere on the Ark? You know, but yeah, immediately, like, he has victories over the Maximals. He did accomplish a lot of his plans. He came so much closer than G1 Megatron ever did to just outright winning. You know, multiple times over. By far a better Megatron. You know, at the very least, far more calculating, more charismatic too. Here's the one everyone's gonna go nuts over, and I know you're gonna fight me in the comments over it. We gotta talk Starscream now. Okay, so let's not get this twisted. G1 Starscream is a fantastic character. He's one of the best characters in the original G1 fiction. He is, you know, the go-to traitor of any Transformer characters, and he's one of the most iconic, you know, treacherous villains of all time. That said, there's a lot of interesting takes on Starscream since then. This is probably where you expect me to bring up Armada Starscream, because I've had done before. And while Armada Starscream is a brilliant twist on the character, it is a character that goes for different things. Armada Starscream isn't out for power. He just hates Megatron as a person. And that simplification now allows him to actually be more complex. But because of that, it's kind of a false equivalent to compare G1 Starscream and Armada Starscream if I'm going to say this is a better iteration of the G1 character. No, to go to that, I have to go to Cybertron, of all things. So let's get this straight. Number 1, more powerful iteration of the character. Number 2, more brave version. So the thing about this Starscream, G1 Starscream is willing to take any opportunity he can in order to usurp Megatron and claim leadership of the Decepticons. In the case of Cybertron Starscream, he's willing to wait for just the perfect opportunity to take over and take power for himself. That came with the Omega Lock. He actually accomplished something G1 Starscream couldn't, which was a grand coup, mostly because he had the guts to see it through. G1 Starscream is always scared of G1 Megatron, you know, at any given point. The only times he makes a serious attempt to take over is when G1 Megatron is somehow incapacitated, you know, and, you know, he thinks that there's an advantage to that, or he can get some edge over on him. but he always chickens out. This, Cybertron Starscream's greatest moment came when he defeated 13 Autobots in a row. And he actually had the willpower and the courage to actually accomplish that. Including Optimus Prime himself, by the way. Starscream, would chicken out at the sight of 3 Autobots. 2, depending on which Autobots showed up. So he could never carry out that grand plan. Whereas Starscream and Cybertron managed to actually do it. So good for him. So when we're talking about the same style of character, yeah, I believe the Cybertron 1 genuinely has an edge over the G1. If only because the trait that keeps G1 Starscream back isn't present in the Cybertron character. So there's a quick list. Like I said, this is kind of low-hanging fruit of a video. There's lots of characters who have different depictions and different iterations that obviously are better than the original G1s, especially if you start looking through the comic books. Gets a little bit trickier with the cartoons, especially when you realize how few G1 characters actually have escaped G1 and have had major roles in modern cartoons. It's not as many as you think. So, if I left anyone out, leave them in the comments below. Let me know who should have been on this list, because I know there's more out there. And as always, I will see you next time.
We parlay with the captain.
You think a werecroc is going to listen to elvish rules of piracy?
Of course it would be the freaking elves that invented parlay.
I had to think of a quick replacement for the French.